Hey guys, this is Dr. Sean, and we're going to be going over the next part of Anatomy and Physiology, Chapter 1, and that's going to be cavities and some interesting stuff with those. So keep watching. All right, so cavities in the body. We have different open spaces of the body. We're not talking about cavities in the teeth. We're talking about internal body cavities as we're talking about like the cranial cavity and the thoracic and that kind of stuff. And we need to understand like how they're set up. So there's two different parts we need to understand with this, first of all. And we're gonna draw our little person like this, like this, and hopefully I can get this down here. And legs go like this, rump, back like this, and here we go. Okay, so in the body, I'll do it like this. It'll be quite simple to do. We have, this is called the ventral, V-E-N-tral. Okay, now think of like sharks have vents kind of like on the front, or maybe a stingray has vents on the front. That's what we're thinking of as a ventral part of the body. It's an older term that we use in different parts of anatomy, but not most of it. This is also anterior, but we're not going to use that. We're going to use ventral for this one. And back here, we're going to say dorsal. Okay, and dorsal like a dorsal fin. I'll have to write that down here somewhere. So we'll actually erase those so I can show you what the heck is going on. So we have ventral and dorsal cavities. Those are the main sections. On the dorsal side, we have the cranial cavity, and this is where your brains go. Okay, so we're going to put a big C here for cranial, and then down here we have the spinal cavity, and the spinal cavity is inside the spinal column, and that's going to hold the spinal cord, basically, is what it holds. That's the dorsal side. Ventral side's a little bit more fun. We have, more stuff in there. Obviously, we're going to have the thoracic cavity. I'm going to put a T here, and separating the thoracic cavity from the abdominal pelvic cavity, actually, we're going to put it like this, is a thing called the diaphragm, which respiratory therapists, you guys are going to have to really understand that sucker. But diaphragm, I'll put it right across here, and this is going to be the abdominal, and way down at the bottom is the pelvic cavity. Now notice I didn't put a line between the abdominal and pelvic areas because there's no real distinction as to where those are. Is it the belt line? Is it the belly button? And one of the things that happens is, like with females, the uterus can start out in the pelvic cavity and work its way up into the abdominal cavity. It doesn't actually dislodge and go. It's like when it grows during pregnancy, okay? There's an old historical weirdness, is they used to think that the uterus could run around the body and cause problems, which is very weird. However, let's look at some other parts of the cavity system. So these are the cavities we got to know. The ventral cavities, thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic, or abdominal, pelvic, and then dorsal, which is going to be the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity. But we have in each of the cavities, so we're going to take, I guess, any of these. We can pretend any of these. So we have, for example, we're going to draw like this. This is the, here's down at the bottom would be the diaphragm, D-I-A-P-H. Okay, there's the diaphragm. And here's lungs, okay, in here. I'm going to draw two lungs. We're going to leave those how they are right now, but we need to understand a couple things. Inside each of these cavities there's some other coverings we have to understand. Now, in Spanish, the word pared means wall, and we have a word parietal, which there's a tissue called it's a serous membrane, and it's the parietal covering inside the thoracic cage. Parietal on the inside wall, so it's going to look like this. It's going to go along the inside of the wall. We'll go all the way, okay, until it gets to the center, and we'll talk about that later. Then it flips around and becomes a visceral serosa, okay, but this has a more specific name. It's called the visceral pleura. Pleura means lungs. You heard of the word pleurisy? Pleura means lungs. So we're going to have the parietal pleura and the visceral pleura. The parietal pleura is on the inside of the walls, and the visceral pleura is on the organ itself. Now, if we go to the heart, which is in the middle here, right, we have the same kind of thing. We're going to have the pericardium. Have a pericardium sac, and we're going to have the heart like this, and then we're going to have a sac around it, and it's going to be covered in a visceral pericardium, and then it's going to loop around and make a parietal pericardium. Okay, so it's a covering around the heart. So directly on the heart is the visceral pericardium, and then it loops around. It loops around kind of like, I'll show you in a second here. So go ahead and keep that guy up there. So if you have the heart is like this. Okay, and then you have all these big veins, arteries and stuff that come out of it and go into it and all this kind of stuff. This is very simplistic, guys. So we have the visceral pericardium, which is right around the heart itself, right? It's directly connected to the heart, and then it loops over. There's kind of this little no man's land, and it turns into the parietal pericardium. Inside here is the pericardial space. You've heard of pericarditis. That's where this stuff comes from. You've heard of maybe a pericardial rub, which is where the serous fluid inside there dries out, and it causes a lot of pain. So we did a couple of them already. We did parietal pleura, which is for around the wall of the inside of the rib cage. Then we have visceral pleura, which covers the lungs. We have parietal pericardium, which is the inside of the sac that holds the heart, the pericardial sac. That flips over or rotates, whatever, and goes in and becomes the covering of the heart, which is called the visceral pericardium. Now in the abdomen, it's called the peritoneum. So we have visceral peritoneum, which is right around all of the guts. Okay, so we have like a little gut like that. That's the gut, whatever. And then right around it is the visceral peritoneum. You've heard of peritonitis, peritoneal disease. That's where these come from. Peritonitis is inflammation of this thing. On the outside of it, it loops around again and becomes the parietal peritoneum. Okay, and that just goes all the way down to the pelvis. We don't name the pelvic one different from the abdominal one at this point. So that's what I want you to understand. So we have cavities, and we have the covering. So we have visceral and parietal. I want you to really understand the difference between visceral, V-I-S-C-E-R-A-L, which means organs, and parietal, P-A-R-I-E-T-A-L. Now you're going to see it again and again. It's going to come up again. Trust me. It's one of the things that keeps coming back to haunt you. So just keep trying to learn that and get those two sorted out in your head. Know the difference between the thoracic set, which is the pleura, and then the pericardial, and then the peritoneal. Now in the cranium, it's a different word altogether. There are different coverings that are named the dura, and that's just because there was a different group of people that were studying on that versus the thorax and abdomen. So this is Dr. Sean, and we're completing up some anatomy stuff. This is chapter 1 in the book. It's the end of class for 1320 and the beginning of class for 1310. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. Don't forget to answer the question that I put in the comments below. I put it in the comments. I didn't make a side quest today. So we'll make sure to do that. And that's how we're going to do some of the attendance for this and also get some information. I want you to just look at that question, answer it real quick, and I'll get your name off those, and that's how we'll do our attendance. So you guys take care. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see the other ones. And I'll put down at the bottom here the playlist so you can see the next and future videos for the Anatomy Adventure Show. Talk to you later. Bye.